thanks everyone for joining and on a Sunday morning. So for those who's meeting me today for the first time, and my name is Adam, and I'll be the technical trainer for the DevOps. So if you guys are here, then ideally there's only for one reason, whether you're an experienced person or you might be a non-IT or someone who's a fresher. So you want to switch into IT. And for all of us, the basic aim is we want to switch into a profile in IT, which pays as well, obviously. That's the important reason. And second thing is a job which is something which we can take and do, not too difficult. That is what we are looking at. Because I won't say programming is difficult, but ideally compared to others, programming will be kind of difficult for beginners or for those who have not come from an IT background, right? So that's where you would see in the market, the cloud and DevOps is being one of the high paid profiles. So with saying that, for the next 30 minutes or so, what I want to talk about is more of your career guidance, because as we see, there's a lot of people with different background here. So let's understand what's exactly the market expectation. So if you want to switch into this profile, what and all that you should know. And whether you are from a non-IT or a fresher or someone who has experience in IT but working in a different technology. So how is that you're going to switch into this, right? And what are the expectations that the companies will have? So that's what we are going to completely discuss and understand. And to begin, let me also tell it, this particular technology called DevOps or cloud is not only about some tools or commands, okay? It's a combination of tools where you automate and you have to use some process to get it done, okay? Now, with that, let me just give you a small intro. So if you have to buy a phone as of now, every one of us go to buy iPhone, even though we know it's very expensive, correct? Why is it still everyone prefers that? It's because of, yes, correct. So if you look at this, that's what I've just put it up. When compared to many other phones, the iPhone's performance is very good, and it doesn't have much of issues, because once you have the phone, it runs for a long time. Even I have a phone which is running more than 5 or 6 years, right? And then obviously most of us, we use phone half of the thing for taking pictures or videos to share it with our friends and relatives. So we need one mobile which not only helps us to do the communication or talk, but also to help us with taking those pictures. So that's where you have top-notch camera. And obviously, I don't want to carry a phone with me which is out of date or doesn't look good or too big. It has to be sleek and easy for me, and obviously attractive. Now, these are the main reasons, even though when we say that iPhone is way too expensive, we buy it, correct? And the same reason, when you now go to a market, if you are going to be joining as a DevOps engineer, you are also going to be paid high, okay? So for what reasons they are going to pay? They are not going to pay just because you're applying as a DevOps engineer, but it is for the characteristics or the skills that you carry, right? So it's not that when I say iPhone, I'll pay for iPhone. So it is for the characteristics or the properties, what I'm going to get from the phone. So the same thing is, it is not about the years of experience, but if you look as of now in the market for a fresher, a person working in cloud and DevOps can get anywhere around 8 lakhs. So this is something based on INR, right? The same thing for someone who's in the mid experience of 5 to 6 years or 7 years, you can easily expect around 25 to 30 lakhs. Okay, that's an average. And if you're a senior, anyone who's about 10 years, you can easily expect more than 50 plus or 60 plus. Now, as the experience keeps growing, you can also get more than that. So by saying the same, remember, It is not that you just put your profile as DevOps, you will be paid, but they will look at certain skills. So if you have that, companies are ready to pay. And the average, whatever I'm talking, is not something which we have just taken from the net. So these are the average what our candidates are getting placed, and that's how we try to take. Okay, because when we say we are trying to send someone for a profile in an interview, we know what's the market expectation. So that's how there is a potential. But now the question comes is, if you go to a interview, will you be able to get? Because most of the time, that is where we lag, right? So that's when, first, as an organization, what exactly is DevOps and why do they need? Just like I'm a customer, if I'm going to buy an iPhone, I have a requirement. So exactly since iPhone matches or a particular version of the iPhone matches, I buy that. So the same way, in an organization, you have different, roles. So there will be a developer, there will be a QA, there will be an administrator, there will be a production support engineer, there will be a customer support engineer, right? There will be a NOC or a SOC engineer. There are different profiles. Even though we have all these things, companies are specifically looking for 4 important areas to improve, right? Because look at the current market, how we run the business. So whether you take Amazon, Flipkart, or any of your social networking or banking sites. So what is happening? We need to deliver continuously, right? So it is not like there is a product which is coming once in 2 years or 3 years. You see, there are releases happening almost every week also, not even month. I'm saying every week it's happening, correct? So you go to sale, Amazon comes up with a sale today, and you will see Flipkart comes up with a sale in just 1 week, right? And then back to back things goes, and they will also go. So continuous delivery means it is not that as a company, I'm able to create a product, but I should also be in a situation to give it to customers or sell it or consumers consume. So that is what we call it as continuous delivery. So it's all about I should develop it, I should test it, and I should be able to give it to customer. So how fast can you do? So that is what I'm trying to say. Now, let's also say if you're working for a very big companies like product-based companies, you also keep releasing every day, correct? Look at the same Amazon or Flipkart. You will not see the same products every day. Why? So there is something which is being updated. So that is the amount of work that is happening in the company. So how do they do this continuous delivery? The second one is scalability. So exactly sometimes when we have a sale, or let's take an example of match. Okay, there's a football match or there's a cricket match. Exactly at a final over or at some point of time, you will see there's a large number of users who log in, correct? So right now, if you take the recent cricket match, you would have noticed Hotstar went close to 5.2 crores viewers. So now they have the same application, but more and more users are logging in. So what will happen if the organization doesn't have the capacity to handle all those users? So when I say capacity, it is what we call it as infrastructure. See, just like I have a room here where 100 people can sit. Now all of a sudden 1,000 people will come. Should I say that, no, wait, I will finish this 100 people, then you can come? Now that will not happen in the business, right? So when the match is happening, will they say, okay, I have only 1,000 servers that I can manage, or you are coming with another 5 crores, I'll not be able to handle? Then they will lose the business. So what they want, whatever the work they are doing, they should be able to scale. Scale means, just an example, if I have 1,000 machines, even if I need 50,000 machines, you should be able to get it in seconds. So that's called as scalability, because that is what is needed for an organization. Now, the next point is high availability. Okay, let's assume you have the ability to scale, you have the ability to deliver continuously, but it is not just you create some machines or database and leave it. What will happen if it is not working? So now, if I want to shop, I can shop 10 o'clock in the morning, or even if I wake up 2 o'clock in the morning, I should be able to still access my website, or if I do a transaction in the bank, it should be available, correct? So how do you make sure that all those applications or whatever the company is giving as a service is continuously running. So that is what we call it as high availability. Okay. And the most recent and important factor that has been added now in the past 1 to 2 years is security, because with more and more people using web-based application, and even all the transactions are through our apps, everything is through web. It has to be secure, right? So that is where the higher focus what organization is doing is, okay, you deliver continuously, you have the ability to scale, but you also make sure everything is running, but keep an eye that how secure your application is. So this is when company started having another profile, like how you have separately developer and QA or system admin. They now got with something called as DevOps. So what is the main purpose of the people who is going to work here is to help the organization in achieving these four things, which is continuous delivery, scalability, high availability, security, right? Now, we can have few more things to it, but let's understand like a basic requirement. Like how when I say I have a programming position, the basic expectation of that engineer is to write program. If I hire a QA engineer, the basic expectation is to do testing. The same way, they have a new profile called DevOps. I mean, not exactly new, but what's the expectation is these four characteristics. Okay. So now, what exactly as a person, if we are going to work in this profile, what is that we need to know? Because what I'm talking about is concept. Now, in order to achieve, companies are looking for some specific skills, correct? So let's say now I'm going to hire a cook. Okay, let's assume I have a huge restaurant and I want to hire a chef, a head chef or a senior chef. Now, what are the skills I should look? So I should say, okay, it's not just about you know to cook. You need to know how to clean. You need to know how to keep your cutting skills proper. How do you serve, presentation? All the things are there. So that's exactly where when we say skills needed, the first thing that if someone is hiring a person as a DevOps engineer, they look for how good he has understanding on a platform. So what do you mean by platform? So far, when you go to a company, whether you are developing, testing, or running some application, whatever you do, you use some infrastructure that will be on a physical machine or what we call it as virtual machine. Okay. But what is happening now? It is being moved to cloud. So they are expecting that we should be aware of any one of the cloud like AWS or Azure, and in that you know how to get the things done. Correct? So just like I go hire a chef, I can't say that the chef knows only to cook on an induction stove, or he cannot say he knows only to cook on a gas stove, right? He should be having familiarity. So that is what here we call it as platform. You are going to do automation as a DevOps engineer, but you definitely need to know a platform, which is more of a cloud. The second skill what organization look at is release management. Okay. Now, just like I said, cooking. Okay, I'm going to compare it so that you understand. Now, the person might be very good in just cooking a tasty, dish. But if I'm going to hire a person who is a senior, then he needs to know end to end, right? Right from how to purchase the right material, how to clean, how to cut, how to cook, and how to present and deliver. Correct? That's exactly when an organization is hiring someone to work on the DevOps role. They don't just look for, oh, you know some tool, that is fine. You need to know how developers are going to use it, how QA is going to use, how an administrator will be using, or how customers is going to be used. In short, you need to know the end-to-end process of how a release happens. You're not going to do everything, but you should be aware, because wherever there is a need, we are going to automate. So that is where it is important for us to know how the product is getting delivered. Because let's say you're going to work for Facebook only. Do you know how Facebook is delivering, how fast they are delivering? So what are the things that you need? Because end of the day, Whatever you are doing is for the business requirement. So unless and until you don't understand how a product is getting created and released in the company, you will not be able to do the automation. So that is where the primary skill is, again, release management. Now, then comes the infrastructure to automate, because in the first point I told, if you are aware of cloud, it is okay. But it is not just you need to be aware, because now I was talking about scalability some time back, right? For the core functionality. So if you are working for Hotstar, or if you are working for Facebook or Amazon, then as soon as customer comes, do you know how to create that 1,000 machines in next 2 to 3 seconds? Do you know how to create hundreds of database in the next 5 seconds? Correct? So that's what we call it as automating. So you will scale, but I will not sit and do everything manually. So knowing platform is one thing, but it's also important skill what an organization is looking at is how do we automate. Now, infrastructure is not only to machine or database. So whatever is needed for your organization to run the application, that's what we call it as automating infrastructure. So that is another skill. What next? Now let's say you created some 1,000 machines. Now you will not use all the 1,000 machines in the same way, because, for example, out of the 1,000 machines, in 100 machines, you might run one type of application. In another 100 machines, you might run another type of application. So like this, each machine will have a different configuration. What do you mean by configuration? Now, I don't want all the 1,000 machines, for example, to be Windows. Let's say I want 100 Windows machine, I want 100 Linux machine, or 100 Ubuntu based machine, or 100 CentOS based machine. Now in that, let's assume one application runs in Java, another application runs in Node, another application runs Python. So creating machine is one skill, that is automating infra. But what is that now you have to do? After creating those hundreds of machines, how do you automatically configure? Because as soon as the machine is created, you need to make sure whatever is needed is automatically arranged and configured so that you can then run your application. So that is where in DevOps, the next skill what a company is looking at is, once you have the infrastructure like a machine, how can you automate the configuration of each server depending on your need? Okay. Right. What's next? The next skill what they are looking at is, when we have a product, it's not just testing. So when a developer writes a program, they will be writing multiple files. For example, let's say Java files, or let's say Python or Go language files. There will be lots of files. There will be thousands and thousands of program files. We cannot directly take it, right? Why? Now let's assume you are installing some application in your mobile or laptop. You click one button and one file is getting installed, right? But do you know that one file is called as a package? Because inside it, there will be multiple small programs running. Okay. So from how developer creates a program into how to create that one single file which is delivered to customer is what generally we call it as build. Okay. So there's an entire process, which is what is release management comes into the picture. So we need to know, when a developer creates a program, how can I collect all the files necessary, and how can I create a product, or what we call it as deliverable, so that customer or QA can use it. And not only that, even for QA to test, there are different kind of testings that we have to do. So how do you automate all this process? Okay. Now, ideally, this is what we call it as pipelines, or technically we call it as CI, CD, builds, all those things will be there. So another important skill what organization is looking at, you don't just create machines automatically, you don't just configure, but you should also know how to create that product, or how to build that product, and how to run the testing. Understand, you don't have to test the product, you just need to know how to run that testing. Okay. So that automation is important. And then, especially when we say build and testing, we also have a requirement on how to run my application. So let me just go back to this point. So your hard start, or let's say you're working for a big company, you wanted 1,000 machines, you created using infrastructure automation. Now, using this skill, you automatically configured the 1,000 machines. Now, how am I going to run my applications in 1,000 machines? So that is where you need to install the application. For the application, you have to do some configuration. Like for example, let's say you are installing WhatsApp, right? Or some other app. Installing is one part, but there is some initial basic configuration you have to do, like your numbers and other things. Same way, for an application, it's not like you just copy paste something or download something and install, but you also have to configure. Now, we have to focus on automating that also. So that entire process where a machine is given to you, but how do you make sure your application is installed and your application is up and running? That is technically called as deployment. So another very, very important skill, which the first thing market is looking at, okay, if you are going to be working in DevOps, then you need to know how to automate that deployments. But remember, you need to know how to automate the product build, and at the same time, you should also know how to automate the deployments, which is where tools like Docker and Kubernetes is quite popular. Okay. Now, what after this? Now, when you are creating so many things, when you are automating the configurations, the third important point which I was telling in the previous slide is high availability. So you created everything, but how do I make sure whether it is running properly? If it is not running properly, I need to take some action and fix. So that will be possible only if you monitor. But once again, if I now give you thousands of machines and applications, I cannot manually monitor. So you need to have a automated way of doing it. So that is another important skill which an organization is looking for in DevOps. And finally, the last skill what I told you was is the security. So now if you are being hired as a DevOps engineer, so these are some of the primary skills that they will look at, but they will also look at how can you run all these automation in a secured way. So that is where whatever the tools that you're using, whatever the process you're using, you should also know how to run it securely. Now for that, there are some additional tools that will be helping. So that is how in DevOps, if you want to get strong on a particular skill, there are some tools and process combined together. You will be able to automate and achieve a problem to be solved. So this is how now when you go to a market, like how I said for a chef, I will look for certain characteristics. For a company to achieve high availability, continuous delivery, scalability, and security, they hire DevOps engineers with these as the primary skills. Okay. Then, if you look at from a process wise, so there is a name for each one of them. So this is when your platform is called as cloud. And if you know the process of release management, that modern process is called as agile. If you know how to automate your infrastructure, then it is called as infra as code. So that's the process you need to learn. Same way, if you want to know how to automate your server configuration, then the process and the tools what you're going to use is called as configuration as code. Same way, if you want to automate your builds and deployments, then you're going to use pipelines. Okay. And then if you're going to automate your deployments, then the concept like containers or orchestration of containers, which is where tool like Kubernetes comes in, and monitoring. And if you start enabling security on all these areas, then that process is called as DevSecOps. So DevSecOps is not different. It is one of the skill where you adhere security concepts on top of all these. Okay. So now this leads to the question, what are the tools available? Now this is where I'm not going to kind of give a list, but let's talk about it in the end. But if you see, there are lots of tools available in the market, which can be open source or which can be enterprise. So it's completely up to the company to decide what you want. Okay. Now, this is where, for example, for infrastructure as code, you have Terraform. For configuration as code, you have Ansible. Okay. For pipelines, you can use Jenkins. Now, for containers, you can use Docker and Kubernetes. For monitoring, you can use Prometheus, Grafana, CloudWatch. There are a lot of things. Okay. And not just that, you also have to take care of log management. Then you will be using tools like Logstash, Elasticsearch, Kibana. And for DevSecOps, for every tool, there is a security. For Terraform, you will use a tool like Checkout. For Docker, you might use a tool like Claire, Hadolint, right? So there's multiple tools. Now, even if you want to enable security for your build and deployment pipeline, then you will be using additional tools like Argo CD, SonarQube. Now, that's where, as an individual, when you go to a company, what is that they look at and what is that you have to learn? Now, when you pick a tool, right? Now, for every skill that we are talking, you need to be picking up at least one tool which is latest. Okay. Don't go to a tool which is too old. Try to take a latest, which can be open source or enterprise. And in that, the tool should be more of cloud native. What is cloud native? Now, all the tools which organizations using, right? You are going to run them on the cloud platform only. So by saying it, you need to know and use a tool which is more adhering to cloud, not on VMs or somewhere else. So that is where whatever the tools that you use, it should be more for cloud native. Based on cloud, it should run. So that's how you should be taking up. So that's where when you start even putting your profile or learning, try to learn one tool at least in each skill, and that should be more of a latest and it should be a cloud native. Now you can either take a open source or an enterprise, it's up to us. Okay, so that's how we are going to proceed. Then, okay, so now we learned there's around 9 to 10 skills needed, and you should be learning one tool in it, is what I said. Now the biggest, another question that will come is, okay, I've been hearing DevOps engineers need coding skill. And now you will start asking, or you will start thinking, I wanted to come to cloud and DevOps because I don't want to go into development. And you are saying now DevOps needs coding. So let's first understand, what do you mean by coding? Okay. So in DevOps, when you try to do automation, whether you use any tool like Terraform, Ansible, Kubernetes, Docker, Jenkins, whatever you use, for the automation, there is some approach called as declarative approach. Okay, in which you create a file and you tell what you want through a automatic way. Now, whatever the file that you give, right, you have to write some syntax. So that syntax is generally called as code. See, it's like in our school days, or even now, you go to some government shop or anywhere, in order to give an application, what do? There's a form, you fill it, or you write some letter and you give it, right? That's exactly when we use different tools, what happens? That tools has a UI. UI means you can click a button, but you cannot automate it there. So that is where you need to create some files and tell. But that file is not programmed. So that is where most of the tools, whatever you take nowadays, we will have to run it by passing some small configuration files or a syntax file. So understand, that is also called as code. But what we are talking for DevOps, you don't need to know programming. That means we are not asking you to code a program, or to avoid confusion, let me be very say, your coding is not programming. Okay. So if you want to be a developer, then you should know how to program. Then what is coding? And that's where I told you, for different automation in DevOps, you will be using something like YAML files or a script, or you might use a JSON file. So for those files, there is some syntax that you're going to put. And in fact, when you say now you're learning these skills or learning the tools like Kubernetes, Docker, or Jenkins, or Terraform, what you're going to learn is how to create that file with different syntax. Okay. So remember, is coding needed for DevOps? Yes, to automate, because we are not going to program. So what we are doing to do is know some syntax of the tool. That is what you are going to eventually learn at the end of the day when you say you're learning DevOps. Okay, so be clear on that. Now, is that enough? Yes, but what happens is, since there is lots and lots of activity that we will be doing, there are scenarios where you don't have a tool to do everything. Okay, so that is where you can't use a complex tool to do some small tasks. Now let me ask a simple example. I will give you a machine and I will say, hey, go and delete some files. Okay, or I will say, can you send email to 100 people? Now for these kind of small activity, you don't need a big tool like Kubernetes, Terraform, or Ansible. Instead, you can now write some small script which can do some automation. Now by saying it, next question is, oh, which scripting to learn? So it again depends on how skilled you are. So if you are more of a person who's beginning your automation, you can try to use shell script, which is completely fine, and you can automate. But only when if you say you want salary 5 times or 6 times, and that's where, right, when I say on a market, if for a 5 to 6 years, if I say 25 lakhs is average, and now if you are expecting 35 lakhs, then there should be some additional skills that you have. So that is when knowing some advanced scripting like Python or Go language will help you at that point of time. If not, knowing at least a scripting like skill shifting will be an added advantage for you. But is it mandatory? I would say it is mandatory only depending on how your skills keep growing. So the more expectation are there, only then. But if not, many things might not still require shell scripting. But when a requirement comes, you should be in a situation to learn and do it. But eventually, the more, like I said on an iPhone, when will you be paying more? It's only when you have more skills. So that is where this is definitely an additional skill which will give value. Okay. So now we understood what is the requirement of an organization in DevOps, what skills we need to know, right? But now the question comes back is, okay, I'm either a fresher or I'm a non-IT person, or most of you guys will be working professional who are working in some other domain in IT itself. Now, is DevOps the right career choice for me? Or how should I switch, correct? Because now when I say our candidates will get an average of 8 lakhs for fresher, or 6 to 8 lakhs for fresher, 25 to 30 lakhs for a mid experience, and 40, 50 lakhs. So what is the secret behind which, how you can apply, correct? And not only that, you should also be very clear, how can you switch your profile from whatever the current responsibility you're doing into what we call it as DevOps. Okay. Now keep this in very generic point. The name of the profile can be changing. Okay. Today they might call it as DevOps. Tomorrow they might call it as no ops, or some other will come. But what is the basic requirement? So now, if you go to an organization, all these are individual engineers who have some specific responsibility. Because you could be a developer. What is your responsibility? Only to create program. If you are a QA engineer, so far your focus was only to test. If you are a release engineer, you are focusing only to work with the product team and customers and help to plan the release. Now, if you are a system administrator, your focus was only to take care of some machines or infrastructure. Or if you are more of a support engineer or NOC engineer, you will only monitor and you will only help the customers and interact with the customers. Same way, you could be any one of like a database administrator or middleware or SAP or anything related. Your focus is there will be one tool. You will be working only on that. So that is how, as of now, all of us were working in a profile where you have only one responsibility and you were doing only that 24/7. But with the market changing, in fact, market has already changed and it is slowly changing. What is happening is all these individual designations or profiles where you will be working on only one task or only one responsibility is going away completely. That is why you see there is something called as recession. Okay. So what's recession if you see? It's not always the problem with the market. See, if there is a problem in the market, your company itself is shutting down or the product itself is shutting down, they might do a layoff. But that is very rare. But if you look at in the market, in the name of layoff, they are sending people one by one, correct? But if you look very carefully, who are getting affected? One, who are not able to do multiple tasks, or the person who are not able to do by taking multiple responsibilities, correct? A person who is doing the same task for a long time. So that is where, for a company, how to I reduce the cost, correct? So the same thing like what I said about cooking. Now I cannot hire one senior who will say, oh, you take care of buying material. I cannot say one more person who will focus on cutting skills. I cannot say one person who will cook only veg. So now I need a head or a chef who can take care of everything. So that's exactly what companies is looking at. So they are slowly adding more and more responsibility. So you can see this common word called multi-hat roles or responsibility. So what do you mean by that? If you are a QA engineer, you are also asked to do some additional work along with your QA. That is, they will ask you to do some deployments. Okay. If you are a system admin, they will also say, try to make sure you look into monitoring. If you are a support engineer, they will also say that don't just focus only on monitoring, but also focus on how a product can be deployed automatically. So that is how for every position, they have started adding more responsibilities. And how is that you will be able to achieve all of them? Only by doing automation. So that's how almost every position, whatever is going through now, is expecting more and more responsibilities. Now for that, you should be able to automate. Okay. So that is how, whether you like it or not, you cannot continue being in the same position, because let's assume you are a working employee and you are a very senior or a junior. You want a better salary, you want a promotion. On what basis promotions will be given? Promotions will not be given on basis like, okay, you did assume X amount of work, you do X plus Y amount of work, I will give you promotion. No, those days are gone. What is happening nowadays? Nowadays, it's not about the amount of work. It is about amount of result that we are getting, amount of responsibilities that you are adding. So if I now add more and more responsibility, then I will be able to automate a lot of things and there will be a value to the company. So that's exactly where the automation comes in. Now, as soon as when you say automation, it is going to go back into any one of the tasks like infra or server configuration or pipelines or deployment or security or cloud or release. That's what exactly. So that is how for all of us, it's an easier way now. If you do not want to continue or if you do not want to switch into adding more responsibilities by learning programming, then the only solution what we have is to learn the skills for automation. And that is where there is a large requirement in the market. Okay. So now if you understand, as I said, by learning those skills additionally, all your profiles can be converted into a different profile where you can showcase that you have already used this in your existing profile, and you can switch into the required DevOps or whatever the automation profile that we want. Okay. So that is the only way that we can do. And not only that, you will also make sure that you are growing in your profile, and with the market changes happening, you will be more stable. Because as I said, I don't want to stress that word again, but only people who are not learning more things, only people who are continuously doing the same task is being chased, right? So if you keep adding more and more skills and trying to take more and more responsibilities, you will always be able to grow. Your IT profile will be more stable, and you will also be able to get good promotions, good hikes. All those things are possible. So whether you like it or not, that's exactly what's happening. So now, with all these things, now if I'm saying, okay, so all of you start learning those 9 or 10 skills, and now you can start applying for DevOps, which is not 100% correct. Why? Let's say, same cooking example. Now you are running a restaurant. One guy will come to you and he will say, hey, you know what? I have been cooking for last 10 years. Okay. I'm very good in cooking, but I also know how to clean, how to buy very good material, but I have not done it. But I have just seen, so I have some knowledge on it. So will you go ahead and hire him? You will not hire, because you don't want to risk your production, or you don't want to risk your customers. So that is where now when company is hiring, so they are expecting that you already have working knowledge. So what do you mean by working knowledge? You have already done some small things. So it doesn't matter for me if a person comes and says whether you have supported 100 machines or 10 machines, I have done some automation. So that way, it's always good to hire someone where they have a practical experience, correct? So that is when learning is different, and how do you apply that? So the secret behind is something what I want you to know for the next couple of minutes. Okay. So assume you have learned, but how are you going to put that into your profile? So eventually now it depends on each position. So let's say if you have all the skills, it is adding more responsibility. So that is how what you can tell in your current profile, you have already done some automation like this. And with that way, you have learned all the latest technologies, and you also have hands-on experience. And with that experience, you would like to go ahead into a new company. So how? For example, let's take you're a system administrator. It doesn't matter how many years of experience. Rather than focusing only on managing VMs, now we know everything will be moved to cloud. So you can say, in my current profile, along with my day-to-day work, I migrated to cloud. For example, let's take AWS. So whatever is needed for that, you have automated, and that is the responsibility you have taken. And not just about migrating, you can say you have automated, and that is where you have used tools like Terraform. Now, after that, you can say, I also took up responsibility in which I created the infra and I configured. And for this, I started using Ansible. So with this, now you can tell you are a system admin, but you have started using cloud, you have started using Terraform, or you have started using tools like Ansible. Now what next? Then you can say, my company started focusing into security. Now, when you say security, you need to make sure security is available in every machine and infra. But along with that, you can say, when we are deploying, we also have to focus on deploying it through Docker or Kubernetes. Now, that is how, when I was working on security, I started working on containers and Kubernetes. So that way, your profile slowly, you can see, you've started taking up all the responsibilities in DevOps. Now, once you are doing this much, then slowly you can say, for one of the project, I also got an opportunity where I developed some pipelines for build and testing and deployment. And eventually, by end of it, you should be able to tell that I have worked on end to end in a release. So what will happen now as a system administrator, you can typically showcase that you were working on administration, but along with it, you have already worked on all these responsibilities in your current project, which can be for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. So depending on how much of automation you are telling, you can show. So this is how you can convert your profile from a system admin to a DevOps engineer or someone who wants to switch into DevOps. Same way, let's say you're a support engineer. Now, the primary focus, what companies will say, like I just told some time back, you want to do more automation. So the first thing what you will automate is monitoring. So since you are a support engineer or NOC engineer, you need to now monitor all your applications, clusters, services, everything. Okay. Now for that, you might start using bunch of tools like Prometheus, Grafana, Elasticsearch, Splunk, whatever you use. Now, when you are automating, obviously all these things will run on cloud. And along with that, you also have to take care of automating the deployment. So then you can say, when I was focusing on monitoring, I also had to focus on automating my builds and deployments. And that is how I started using tools like Jenkins or other tools. But when you say pipeline, it also involves automating your deployment. And now you can also say, okay, I started automating monitoring, then I automated pipelines, but when I automated pipeline, I was also given a responsibility to work on Docker and Kubernetes. But eventually, when you do all these, you need to work on a cloud or a platform. And that's where you can say, slowly, I also started working on automating my infrastructure and automating my machines configuration. So by end of this, what will happen? You will also say, I focused on security. So from a support engineer, if you see, you can start telling how you were able to take up these responsibilities in your work, and end to end how you worked on all the required skills. And that is how you can now go ahead and straightforwardly apply for a DevOps or something similar to it. Okay. Same way. Now you might think, what will a QA engineer do? But now understand, if you are a QA engineer, we don't need another person like a support person to come and do the deployments. So we are expecting, as a QA engineer, you should also automate the process of build and deployment. So that is where, being a QA engineer, you can also take up the responsibility of running pipelines like CI, CD. And when you do it, you will also be taking care of deployments. So how does the pipelines and Jenkins runs? You need to have Docker and Kubernetes. So now, when you say you have also worked on creating images and automating the deployments through Kubernetes, the next one is security. Because security is not only for system admins or support engineers, it's also for us. So that is where you can say, I worked on pipelines, I worked on Docker and Kubernetes to automate the pipelines, and I enabled security. But eventually, when you say security, you can say, for automating all these things, I also created machines, and for that machines, I use tool like Ansible to configure. Maybe to begin with, you can say only for your testing and deployment, you have used the tools like Ansible and security and Docker. And eventually, when you now say your machine configuration, where are you going to run all of them? All of them will be executed on cloud. And that's how slowly, from being a QA engineer, you get an opportunity to work on all these tools and also to take care on the cloud. But now if you see, how do you project yourself? Rather than saying I am a QA engineer who will focus only on QA automation, you can say I'm a QA engineer who knows and who has already worked on developing pipelines for build, deployments, and I've worked on tools like Kubernetes, and I have enabled security in all of them, and I have worked on automating this deployments and testing completely on a cloud like AWS, and I have also enabled security. So this is how, rather than calling yourself as just a QA engineer, you can talk more about a person who has worked with the skills needed for DevOps. Okay. So that's how you can convert your profile from a QA engineer to DevOps. Same thing. Question might come whether you are a developer or a very senior person like an architect. Now, you should not be focusing only on the programming side, but the very key skill what is needed now is your code should be cloud native. Now, I'm specifically talking to developers and architects. So if I say, okay, my application is Java based or Node based or Python based, you should equally know how will it run on cloud. And for that to run in cloud, what and all services needed? Because a developer would be the correct person to understand the product and to understand the services. And that is where it is very much needed that you should know how your application is going to run on cloud. And if you have the automation for that, then it is going to be a very big responsibility that you can take care. Now, when you can take care of automation in cloud, you will also be working on containers. So which way you can tell as a developer or as an architect, first I migrated my application to cloud. Then you can say you migrated everything into Docker and Kubernetes, which is what was your next responsibility. And when you can do this much, you can also say, then I helped the other teams where how to set up a end-to-end pipelines for CI, CD, those kind of things. Now, eventually, once it is done, you can also say, I develop, because there is a development in everything. So a developer can say, I wrote Ansible scripts, I wrote Terraform scripts, I wrote Kubernetes scripts, right? So that is how being a developer, you can also develop the automation that is needed and help the company in implementing DevSecOps. So eventually what will happen now? From being just a developer, this is how you can also showcase that you have worked on all these skills by taking responsibilities, and in your recent projects, you have done all these things end to end in a release, correct? Now, one last point over here is, okay, now I'm just talking about system admin or a developer or a QA. Now, most of the others will be into this category where you are a database guy or a middleware guy or a SAP or anyone where you have a specific tool to take care. So what you will be doing, there will be one tool or there will be two tools and there will be some specific machines related to it. And you will be only focusing on working on that. And that's where how you can showcase is think of automating in your current task. So now, whether for your database or middleware, for SAP or anything, you definitely use machines, right? So how can you automate that machines? That's exactly what we call it as configuration management or configuration as a code. So you can start by telling this in your profile. Now, for my database or for my middleware, I had some machines. First, I focused by adding a responsibility of automating, which is what we call it as DevOps. And now once you automate it, then you can say, where are these machines? This machine is in cloud. So I also took the responsibility of automating the entire infra that is needed for my activity or my role in cloud. So for that, I have used tools like Terraform or Ansible. So that's how you can start. Now, once you do this, next you can say, I also had to enable security. So that is how from being a database guy or from a SAP or a middleware, now you know how cloud will work, you know how to automate the cloud infra or configuration and security. Now then you can say in one of the recent projects, you got an opportunity where I should also focus on deploying. And that is where I got an opportunity to work on Docker and Kubernetes. Now you can see from a DBA or from a middleware, you can say how you have worked on Ansible, Terraform, security, and Kubernetes. Now, once this is done, then you can extend by saying, since I have also taken care of Docker and Kubernetes, I started also working on the product side and building pipelines for my product. That is like CI pipelines or CD pipelines. Now, once it is done, now you can say from DBA or middleware, you also have the end-to-end release process. So this is how the secret behind how you switch your profile is learn all the skills and apply it. And when you go, don't just say that I am an engineer with 10 years, 5 years, 2 years, where you have just worked on one skill, but how you have used all the skills and showcase to your current profile. Okay. And this leads to the last question. What about non-IT people? Or what about freshers? The same holds good. And this is when what we want you to do is try to learn the project, but when you learn, try to do some projects in which you will also be able to automate everything one by one, so that whether you are putting a minimum of 1 year or 2 years and saying that I have worked in DevOps, don't just tell I have worked on tools. Rather, you should be showcasing on how you have used the skills and tools, and you have automated infrastructure, you have automated pipelines, you have automated deployments, and then your profile will be uplifted. Okay. So that's how each one of us has to know how to showcase this. Okay. So with all these, now how exactly that we are going to help you, or what is that we can do to help you, right? Now, this is when uniquely we wanted to bring up this program called DevOps Architect Program, where definitely you're going to learn on all the tools and technologies and process needed, not from a basic level, but from basic to advanced level. Because let me tell you, like when you go to market, and especially Kubernetes is one side, Kubernetes also has the developer side and the administration side. So most of you will focus only on the developer side, but when you go to interview, questions are more and more focused on administration. So that is where what we want to do is all the tools and technologies which is needed as of now latest, we will go through, and along with it, we will go from a basic to an advanced level, so that whether you are applying for a job or you want to do certification, it should be easy. Now, how do we do it? Now, what's unique, right? Because everyone will tell you the same thing, that, yeah, we will teach you. But what will be unique is we take a 4-step approach. Okay. Now, what we wanted to do as of 2024, and with the requirements what we have. Now, the learning process, we wanted to divide it into 4 parts. So first, we want to put something called as a prerequisite. So that regardless of whether you are a fresher or a non-IT, or even you are an IT guy, but on a different domain, before you start learning the tools, what and all are the prerequisites? So what do you mean by prerequisites? Like, what is release process? How does a product build? You don't need to know how a Java program will be created or a node code will be created, but you definitely need to know what is built. How should I build it? What are the basic setup or environment needed for me to run a Java application or run a node application, right? So for a release process, what happens in the beginning? What kind of testing happens? These are all the things what we call it as prerequisites. Because without knowing the process and prerequisites, if you directly jump into the tool, what is happening when you go to interview, they will ask you very straightforward questions like, okay, tell me how many engineers you supported, how much of automation you did. See, just like you are a cook, you can't just go to someone and say, I know how to cook for 10 people. And now give me 100 people, I will cook. No, there is a difference between how much of material needed for 100 people and a 10 people. That exactly is what we are talking. Okay. So we want to first go through all the prerequisites, so that even if you are from a non-IT or a fresher or from a different domain, what exactly you need to know before jumping into the tools. That's what we will be doing in step 1. And step 2, we will go through all the latest tools which is cloud native, which will work more on a cloud. So that way, all those 9 skill sets, whatever I was talking, or 10 skill sets, we are going to learn. Now, what after that? Now, this is where you are going to do lots and lots of projects. Okay. You will do more than 20, 25 plus projects you will be doing. And you will also be doing capstone projects, so that you will understand how all of them are interrelated. But we strongly believe if we keep giving you projects, because you want projects, you don't need us. Go to Google, type, or YouTube, type, you will get hundreds of projects. But only when you implement the project by yourself, correct? It will be easy for you to understand, because getting a job might be easy, but going inside a job and surviving will be difficult. And that is where our unique plus point that we wanted to add is bring in this third step called DevOps internship or job ready. So what we are going to do, by the time you complete your step 2, you know all the tools, you have more than 20 plus projects and capstone projects done, but all these things are what we have already done and giving to you. But what we want in third step is, in the job ready program, we want you to start implementing. So that's how, if you are locally available and if you are a fresher or a non-IT, we want you to be at the office every day, and we will try to give you projects and we will guide you how to do, and we want you to do it. So that's how, the more and more you do hands-on, it will be easy. Now, the same thing for those who are online, you will also get assistance on what you can do. But eventually, the more you are in the classroom, it will be easy. But if not, you have to frequently visit and start working. So that's how, in the internship, focus is not just we do some projects and give you, because you would by now know everything. So you should just start implementing and doing the projects by yourself. And not just this, if you are a fresher or if you are someone with career gap or non-IT, the time that you're taking to work, you can take this itself as a certificate and go and start applying that, rather than applying as a fresher or a career gap. You use this 6 months or 8 months or whatever you want by saying, I was learning and I did some internship with Wezva Technologies, where these are all the skills I learned and these are all the projects I did. So that is how, when I say a fresher is going to get hired with 6 lakhs or 7 lakhs, is not blindly by telling tools, but by showcasing that you have already worked in some company like Wezva Technologies where you have implemented some projects. So that's how it's going to be beneficial, definitely for freshers and those with career gap or switching with non-IT. But obviously, even if you are a working employee, you can also use this, because one time people might ask, oh, you are a DBA, how did we switch? Then you can tell, in some situations, I learned tools by myself and I did the internship. So this is how I was able to get new skills. And with that, in my current project or in my current organization, I applied for a new project. So that way, this internship is going to definitely help for everyone in a different way. And eventually, by this time, what we will also do is start helping you in your job support. So which is more about how to prepare yourself, okay? And what exactly is the assistance that you need, right? So that's how it takes close to 3 to 4 months for you to completely prepare. But by the end of third month or fourth month, you should be able to completely ready to start applying. Okay. It's not like you do projects and start doing. In fact, when you start working on the projects in the DevOps, you will also start preparing your profile. And that's where we will be able to do the mentoring. Got it? So this is the way that we want to approach, not just to teach you all the tools and projects, but also to guide you how to apply this in your current profile and also make you job ready. And if needed, take this internship and start showcasing how you can use this 6 months or 8 months of knowledge and try to put it in your profile. Okay. So what next? And that's where I want to stop with just one thing is, so I was telling you the prerequisite. So what are those prerequisites? So prerequisites about, you should know how the process of release works. What are the different types of testings that we are doing? How does a developer work? How does a QA work? What do you mean by a release cycle? And what are the development knowledge you need? Now, you don't need to know how to write a program, but you need to know how to build it. You need to know how to deploy. You need to know how to run. So these are all the primary prerequisites that you need to know. So this is where what we want to do is put it up as a masterclass, so that for the next week completely, from March 4th to 8th, we want to take up close to 10 to 12 hours and focus on all the prerequisites. So that way, even if you're already working, you should be able to understand, or even if you're a non-IT or a fresher, whatever is the need, we will learn everything from the scratch. And with that, later on when you start learning the tool, it should be easy. So that's where this masterclass is for everyone, and I highly recommend you guys to take, and it's completely a free class. Why? Because for two reasons. One, definitely before you start learning the tool, you should know this process. And second, most of you have these questions like, okay, I want to join a course, but after 3 days, 4 days, you start realizing that the way of teaching is not suiting, or you might understand, or if you're not comfortable with the teaching. Now, rather than you pay first and decide later, now what we want you to understand is to look at how the training and to realize how it is going to be useful for you. So you get comfortable with our way of teaching and mentoring, and then kind of start going ahead into your actual tool. Okay, so that's the complete focus, because if you're not prepared for this, then eventually there is no point for you to start enrolling into the course. So that's the reason we want to make sure that you have all the prerequisites that is needed, and once you have prepared and learned, then kickstart your actual course, which will be for 2 months, and then do the projects in the third month, and then start applying. So that is how the mentoring will also be happening. Okay. So with this, I would like to stop it here. And as I said, the masterclass is going to begin from tomorrow. That's March 4th, and it will be going until the next 5 days. And it's completely open. So for anyone who is interested, feel free to ping us or reach us, or I think you would have already been in touch with Arjun. Let us know. And this is going to happen from Monday to Friday, the next week, morning 7 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. in the IST. All right. So with this, let me stop it for now. But if there's any questions, I'm happy to share.